Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a collection of camping and cryptid stories for you, as well as the pleasure of being joined by my good friend Deadly Cure. But first, have you heard of the insane health benefits of cocoa flavanols? The compound found in cocoa that boosts nitric oxide, improves heart health, and regenerates brain cells? Let me show you. Harvard scientist Dr. William Lee actually backs this up.
So, studies have been done to show that the flavanols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow like bees in a beehive in your bloodstream, and they go out and they find wherever it needs to be repaired. If it's in your heart, they'll fix it. If it's in your liver, they'll fix it. If it's in your skin, they'll fix it. And so we can eat foods like high flavanol cocoa in order to be able to actually get the stem cells to work a little bit better. Now, how do we know this actually functions, works in people? Well, clinical studies have been done with high flavanol cocoa to show that in like men who are in their 60s with heart disease, they could actually just have 2 cups of dark chocolate hot cocoa a day for a month. Yeah. And they doubled the amount of stem cells in their bloodstream, and their circulation improved measurably. And then what's even more important and impressive is that there was a study called the Cosmos study that was completed recently that showed that eating high flavanol cocoa decreases the risk of cardiovascular death.
Yeah.
Right? Over a period
like a statin.
Like a statin. Right. Exactly. Except maybe by eating the same thing that you use to make chocolate. So we're not telling people to go out to have chocolate, which is a confection, which has got a lot of sugar and all kinds of other stuff in it. Yeah. But it's the stuff underneath it, the core of it.
That's right, dark chocolate. But here's the thing. Flavanols are the good stuff found in cocoa beans that are usually destroyed in the chocolate making process. And that's where Black Forest supplements come in. With the first ever high flavanol cocoa powder packed with everything your body actually needs. Just 200 calories, tastes amazing in coffee or protein shakes, and it boosts your body's natural stem cell production. I've worked out an exclusive deal with my guy at Black Forest Supplements to hook you up with a 40% off for the next 48 hours. But this stuff always sells out, so don't wait. Hit the link in the description or pinned comment to stock up before it's gone. One of the scariest things I've ever experienced happened deep in the woods of Kentucky, and I still think about it more often than I'd like to admit. A buddy and I were hiking to our campsite late at night. We'd gotten a late start and figured it'd be fine. We both had strong headlamps, knew the trail, and had done this sort of thing before. But that night the woods felt different. The trees were packed tight, the air was heavy with moisture, and once we got a few miles in, the light from the stars and moon was completely swallowed by the canopy. Beyond the reach of our lights, it was absolutely black. We were walking quietly, not out of fear, but out of respecting the silence of the forest. About halfway to the site, my friend suddenly stops. He pointed ahead and whispered, "There's the trail marker." At first glance, I saw it too. 2 bright reflective spots hovering just ahead, maybe 6 feet off the ground. They looked like those metal or plastic reflectors nailed to trees to mark a path. But something about it didn't sit right with me. The spacing was wrong, too wide, and they were perfectly still. There was a very faint sway to them, like whatever they were attached to was breathing. I stepped forward a little and squinted, trying to make sense of it. And then I realized we weren't looking at a trail marker, but 2 eyes set far apart, glowing faintly in the dark like the reflection from an animal's retina. Only they were big, far bigger than what they should have been, and far too high off the ground. Then without warning they moved. Not a blink, not a step. Just this sudden, eerie bobbing motion, like it had crouched or shifted its weight. And then it was gone, vanished into the black without a sound. There was no rustle, no snap of a twig. Just silence. We both stood there frozen for a long second, listening so hard it felt like our ears were going to burst. Then in perfect sync, we reached for our knives. Neither of us said a word. We just kept moving slowly, deliberately scanning every shadow as we hiked the rest of the way to camp. Once we got the fire going, we stayed close to it. We talked loud, laughed louder, and made anything to break the silence, and maybe convinced whatever was out there that we weren't easy prey. Every so often one of us would sweep the tree line with a flashlight, but we never saw those eyes again. I don't think we slept more than a few minutes that night, maybe half an hour just after dawn when the light returned and the woods felt like the woods again. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd been watched the entire time. Whatever it was, it knew the forest better than we did, and I have a bad feeling we only saw what it wanted us to see. I used to live in central Idaho for work, not far from a small town near the edge of the Sawtooth Range. I'd spend a lot of weekends hiking and doing solo overnight trips to explore the area. If you've been up that way, you'll know how vast and empty some sections can be. Deep drainages, thick timber, and long stretches without cell service, or even faint signs of other people. One late September afternoon, I packed up for a quick overnight trip into the lesser-traveled part of the range. I had a topo map and had picked a route that would make me off-trail and up into a high basin with some decent elevation. I left late enough that by the time I got a few miles in, I was running out of light and picked a small flat spot just below a ridgeline to bivvy out for the night. The spot overlooked a small creek drainage and had a pretty good view. I didn't bring anything fancy, just a bivvy sack, pad and a quilt. No fire, I kept it simple, and by 8:30 I was zipped up and listening to the wind die down. I awoke at 1 a.m. with a brutal headache. It came in waves, sharp pressure behind my eyes. Then it would fade and come back just as strong. I lay there for a while trying to figure out what was causing it. I'd hydrated well and hadn't exerted myself too hard, but something felt off. My breathing was a little tight too, like I couldn't get a full breath comfortably. While I was lying there trying to ride it out, I started to notice a sound coming up from the slope above me. It wasn't sudden, but it slowly became clear, a deep, long, and weirdly spaced out vocalization. I know how coyotes, elk, owl, and even mountain lions sound in the night, but this didn't fit any of those. It sounded like a slow, low-pitched whoop or holler, not in quick succession like howls or yips, but single spaced-out calls every 20 to 30 seconds. It echoed slightly off the trees, and the pitch carried. It didn't seem to move at first, just repeated from the same spot up the ridge. I lay there listening for about 20 minutes, not sure what to make of it. The longer I listened, the stranger it felt. It didn't sound aggressive, but it was odd, too deliberate, too frequent, and too off-pattern for any animal I've ever heard in the woods, and that made me uneasy. Eventually, with my headache getting worse and the feeling that I wasn't going to sleep anyway, I decided to pack up and head back to my truck. There was an old Forest Service road above my camp, gated and not open to vehicles, but it looped back down to the main access road. It was longer than the way I came in, but easier to follow in the dark. The strange part is, as I made my way uphill to the road, the sound seemed to follow, not directly, but it stayed uphill from me, at a constant distance, perhaps 200 yards off, always just out of view, always a bit above me. I'd stopped walking, and the sound would stop. I'd move again, and within a minute or two it would start again. I never saw anything, and I never got closer, but it stayed in step, tracking along the ridge as I moved. As soon as I dropped about 300 feet in elevation and rounded the far side of the hill, the headache just stopped, not gradually but instantly. Breathing normalized too. I kept walking, and by the time I got to the truck I felt completely fine. Later that morning after getting home, I started looking up audio clips of wildlife in Idaho. I figured it was maybe a bird I wasn't familiar with, or maybe a variation of a known animal call that I'd just never heard before. But nothing matched. I went down some internet rabbit holes trying to find a similar recording. Eventually, I stumbled upon so-called whoop recordings attributed to Sasquatch. One of them was eerily close to what I'd heard. I'm not saying that's what it was. I don't know what I heard, but the pattern and tone were the most accurate I'd found. I've been back in that general area since and haven't heard it again. I even hiked through the patch of forest I think where the sound came from, but didn't hear anything. I don't have a solid conclusion. Could have been something natural I hadn't heard before, could have been something weird in the environment, echo, acoustic, something throwing off perception. But I will say this, I've done a lot of backcountry nights, and this one still stands as my most unsettling. I've done a lot of backpacking and camping over the years, and I've seen some wild stuff. Weird animal encounters, near misses with bad weather, close calls with injuries, but nothing that has ever scared me like lightning. The first time I really understood how dangerous it could be was in northern New Mexico, in a range kind of like the Sangre de Cristos. I was on a 2-week backpacking trip through a high-altitude trail system popular with scouts. Gorgeous terrain, big views, open meadows, scattered pines, but the weather there can turn fast. We were making dinner at a camp one evening. The sky looked a little sketchy, some clouds building, but the sun was still high, shining through, so we didn't think much of it. Then boom. Lightning hit a tree maybe 50 feet from us, and the tree basically exploded. It shredded the bark. Dinner flew, and everyone dove in different directions. That one bolt changed the vibe instantly. We had a couple more storms that trip, but nothing came that close again, but it still stayed with me. The second and by far the scariest experience was on the Granite Range in Central California. We were doing a multi-day loop through a remote area with alpine lakes and steep granite valleys. Think something like Sierra Nevada, but without naming it directly. One night, we camped near a river at the bottom of a narrow canyon. The site was scenic, designated by the park, but I remember seeing debris up in the trees, logs and sticks, wedged in weird spots. Clearly the area had flooded before. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the brightest flash I'd seen in my life. My eyes were closed and I still saw it. Before I could process anything, thunder crackled so loud, it sounded like the world had split in half. And it wasn't just the sound, it was the pressure, the movement. It's a boom that shakes your soul. And it didn't stop. We were right under the storm cell. Lightning kept flashing, thunder overlapping, and rain came down like it was trying to drown the tent. The strikes were so frequent that the whole forest around us lit up through the tent walls. You could see tree outlines like it was midday, and I legitimately thought I might die, either from a direct strike or a sudden flood. The third time I was in the Eastern Alps, on a trip through Central Europe. We were descending out of the mountains when a fast-moving storm overtook us in a high meadow. There were no trees and barely any boulders, just us and the open terrain as the sky opened up. Lightning started striking far too close for comfort, but there was nowhere to go. All we could do was spread out, squat low and wait it out. It was miserable and terrifying. I love thunderstorms. When I'm in a cabin or on a covered porch, watching the sky light up from a shelter is one of life's little joys. But when I'm exposed in the backcountry and hear that distant rumble, that's when the primal fear kicks in. I've never felt smaller or more helpless than during those lightning storms. Respect the sky, folks. you can easily get cooked. I used to camp all the time as a kid, but after moving away from the mountains for a while, life got in the way. This trip was my first time camping again in over a decade, and I decided to go alone. It was a long drive to where I was heading, and I got a lot later start than planned, so I ended up pulling off onto a quiet Forest Service road in a national forest to camp for the night. I just intended to sleep in the back of my truck, to be honest. It was twilight when I started setting up, getting my air mattress and sleeping bag sorted in the cab. I remember noticing how dead quiet the woods were. There were no squirrels, no birds, just silence. I was deep in and far off any main roads, and figured it was just that time of evening when everything starts to settle down. That is, until I heard a Stella J make an alarm call. If you spent time in the woods, you'll know corvids, jays, crows, ravens. They don't sound off like that for no reason. They alert to predators, hawks, owls, coyotes, and mountain lions. I look up, just in time to see a shape pass silently between two trees, maybe 25 yards away. I couldn't see the head or tail, just the top of the hindquarters moving through the brush, tawny colored, low to the ground. At first I thought a deer, but it moved completely silently, and that's when it clicked. The forest floor was covered in years of dry pine needles and leaves. Anything walking through should have made a bit of noise. Deer crunch, even bear crunch. Only predators move that quietly. It was a mountain lion. From the direction it was moving, I figured it would have to cross the creek I was camped next to. I kept an eye out, expecting to see it again as it continued along its path, but it never reappeared. That's when the unease kicked in. I started rushing to get everything squared away, rolling out my sleeping bag and tossing gear into the truck bed. The feeling of being watched was growing by the second, and as soon as I got the last of my stuff in, I stammered the tailgate as hard as I could. I heard it then. 3 heavy bounds in the brush. Not crashing, just strong and purposeful leaps. It hadn't left the area. I got in the truck and didn't leave it until morning. I had bears walk past my tent before, and I've listened to wolves howling on a ridge above camp. But nothing compares to the intensity of that encounter. I never actually saw the cat fully, but the corvid warning, the silence, and the heavy measured steps will stick with me forever, knowing that I nearly became dinner. I took my super skeptic boyfriend on our first camping trip up to the Mount Adams area because I'd heard of some spooky UFO action. We hadn't been dating that long. We saw UFO action that defied his skeptic explanation in a dispersed spot, but nothing I hadn't seen before. Lights appearing out of nowhere, zipping along and then vanishing. Lights appearing and joining up, then vanishing. It was pretty satisfying to hear him say, "Yeah, I have no idea what that is." A few months later, we were camping with his dad and stepdad, who were both long-time veterans in the Forest Service and BLM. We mentioned the spot that we had camped, and his stepdad, who was not a believer of anything like this, said that the Mount Adams Gifford Pinot area had been his beat for years. Without any prompts from us, he said, "We were supposed to be up there looking for camp thieves. We never caught any thieves, but we saw a lot of weird stuff in the sky." When I pressed him for details, he got a little cagey, but did tell a really creepy story about how these big, black logging trucks with no lights would appear to steal lumber in the middle of the night, So he and his partner staked out one night to try and catch them, backed into the bush, and had to sit in complete silence to let the truck cool down so no one could detect them with heat or night vision goggles. The back of the truck was deep in the bush, meaning it was only forest behind them. Then after over an hour, sitting in silence, these huge bright lights appeared from behind them, from deep within the forest. So bright he could see the entire outline of the truck, the antenna, the spotlights, and the silhouettes in the shadow. This was in the early 80s, so we're not talking LED lights here. He said he'd never seen anything like it. Then the lights went out and everything was silent. There was no truck noises, no rustling in the forest behind him. I love the guy, but he has the imagination and personality of a potato. There's no way he made it up. That's why it's so creepy and believable.
I'm 38 now, and starting roughly 19 years ago, I was in the woods behind one of my friend's houses camping. We were maybe 600 to 650 yards away from the house, and only took a few steps in the direction of the house to see it on the other side of the cornfield that was used for hay that year. We had a fire started, and we were just hanging out and talking and enjoying the summer night. We had gone to Lake Michigan earlier, and a girl we met that lived nearby decided to come with us and hang out, being our one friend knew her somewhat from his job. We all agreed she should get the tent and we would all sleep around the fire. After an hour or so, we had an amazingly bright light shine down right over us. We all kind of wriggled and got up, but then a strong wind came down on us and the light slowly moved away. We all decided it was the police helicopter looking for drug plants and maybe saw our heat and the fire on the thermal camera. We all laid back down, and within maybe 10 minutes, we would all be back up, hearts racing. As we laid there was an ear-splitting scream. Before any of us could get up, something with some considerable weight hit the leaf-littered forest floor. Now, all of us standing up, a creature that seemed no larger than a wolf ran, not walked, multiple times around us before we could get a beat on its location. The girl now was in the tent doorway, and two of my friends had almost teleported into the tent, they moved so fast in fear. At this point, the creature had stopped moving, but we still couldn't pinpoint where it had stopped. The only views we could get was it had a grey and white fur, not patterned but random patches of white on the grey. It moved more like a person on all fours, but way faster than even a wolf on a dead run. We also realized that the helicopter we figured was the dope scope was still nearby. Not far, but we could see stars being blocked out by it moving from west to east, almost like it was strafing. Another 10 adrenaline-filled minutes passed, and we assumed it had left. After another hour of laying there, listening and waiting for its return, we all started falling asleep. In the morning, nothing in the campsite was disturbed and nothing was damaged. I walked back to the house to get some eggs and other things for breakfast. Nothing felt off except for the constant feeling of being watched from the woods. But after that long night, I could understand it. On the way back though, at the different angle of view, I noticed 3 distinct areas in the hay that were pressed down in an almost perfect triangle. Once I got closer, there was a static feeling to the air, and all my arm hairs stood up. As I got closer to the woods, a strong feeling to turn around hit me like a ton of bricks. Across the field, around 250 yards away, there is a section of the woods that splits into 2 fields. This section was maybe 50 yards long, jetting into the field, but was at its thickest parts only about 12 feet wide. In the narrow strip of trees stood a cross between a dog and a great ape about 6 to 7 feet tall on 2 legs. Imagine the stereotypical Bigfoot image, but give him the hind legs of a canine and a dog-shaped snout, but not as long proportionally to the head. It seemed what I would describe as being uncomfortable being on 2 legs, as it swayed side to side like it was unbalanced. I turned back and headed to the campsite and made breakfast, saying nothing to the rest, as heading back to the house would have us going right by the creature. Roughly 3 hours later, we headed to the house, and there were no sightings or off feelings. The next sighting was about 4 years later, while hunting on family property about 4 miles from the original sighting. I was sitting in the woods by myself that evening. I had a group of 4 does come in. Now, I would sit in the thicker woods, but I had a 270 sighted in at 100 yards. I had 3 lanes that were optimal for that rifle, but 2 years before, got a hard shot on a buck only 75 yards away and threaded a needle with the bullet, so I was very comfortable with any shot. Anyway, the does were calm and moving slowly, feeding with no care in the world. After several minutes, the largest doe kept checking behind them, hearing something, but I could not. They suddenly jumped all at the same time and even crashed into the trees trying to get away. I still heard nothing and couldn't see anything in the direction she was looking. Slowly, I noticed a grey and white haired creature moving in down like a canine hunting. When I got the first good look, I immediately recognized it. This time though, I didn't have any anxiety, no racing heart, and felt completely calm, unlike the first encounter. It was not because I had my rifle, as the first encounter I had my shotgun. It was unloaded and I had no shells, just a visual thing if someone wanted to mess with us, that I carried to and from the house even. It moved through the woods and almost seemed to be avoiding me, but also the feeling it knew I was there. It walked behind the denser underbrush and would almost leap through the shooting lanes I had, as to try and stay hidden and not give me a shot. Not that I was going to, as I have a strong belief that cryptids and paranormal interactions should be viewed and felt with strong action as a last resort. It only made a very low growl as it would have been entering the field, about 75 yards from me. I waited around 30 minutes before heading in for the night, as the creature moving through would have kept anything from coming in. As I walked back, I never felt the need to rush or even look behind me. Coming into the small grass field we let grow over the property there, once again was a rush of wind and a dark object in the sky, which I could see better this time as a triangular-shaped object, but had rounded out sides like a triangle that was filled and the sides were about to burst. It moved slowly the direction the creature moved, and then very quickly disappeared in the opposite direction. The last time I had an interaction with the same creature was only 3 years ago, but now 50 or 55 miles to the south. I was hunting the Allegan State Game area, only a few days into the firearms season. Anyone that knows that area during deer season knows it's filled with hunters from all over. I would usually go to the more difficult areas as the city people wanted to hunt 10 feet from their vehicle and not have to work for their deer. I was deep in the woods by the Swan Creek area, and the sun was just starting to get up to be able to break through the dense trees. I'm used to the weird and sometimes unsettling feeling that area gives you, but today felt weird. I hadn't seen any other cars on my way to the area, so I felt good about a successful hunt. As the minutes went by, I could hear a few deer moving in and was hoping a buck wouldn't be far behind. It was cooler this morning than the last few, and it was easy to see one's breath. I started seeing the breath from behind some berry shrubs that I believed to be the deer that I had heard, and was excited to see them move through. After 10 minutes went by and the breath kept coming from the same spot, I started thinking maybe there is a buck behind the shrubs and he can smell me or knows something's up. Then the does all booked it through the opening by the shrubs and were full speed through the woods. Shortly behind them was the sight I forgot about, and this time had my heart almost exploding with anxiety. Without any threat towards me, at least at that moment, my fight or flight was at red level, and I was panicking about what to do. I'm around 1,000 yards in dense woods, with many hollows and ridges to get to my vehicle, and nobody hunting with me to try and get to me. Being like the zone I was in, I had my shotgun, but with what I had seen in the past, I wasn't too sure I was safe, even with it. I traveled roughly 150 yards, staying relatively slow as to not make noise. As I waited by a tree and was listening and looking behind me, the woods were dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels running about, and no wind. Some would think this is great because you can hear everything, but those who spend time in the woods know when an apex animal moves in, either the warning calls go off or it goes silent in the woods. I kept moving at a more increased pace and kept checking my phone for better service to call my in-laws to head out to my area for assistance. I was maybe 200 yards from my vehicle, and I had seen what I thought was my true end. On a small mound about 75 feet ahead stood a creature on all fours, but this one was different. Their hair was brown and black, looked to be bigger, and this time the front half was fully visible, and I could see that it was the same kind of beast I had seen each time before. Half wolf, half great ape, and I thought this thing is a test tube baby of some mad scientist. It stared directly at me for 5 minutes, and I was sure the other was somewhere close watching from behind. Then a huge gust of air came through the trees, and the creature ran as if it was being hunted itself. I leaned against a tree by me and sighed and felt huge relief wash over me, almost like a shower of protection. I opened my eyes and looked up, feeling I would see the same thing as before, but there was clouds in the open sky. Then clouds seemed to distort and morph, kind of like when glass has a curve or defect and it distorts your view of objects behind it. I know it was another craft flying above the trees, and it was either a different one altogether or a different mechanism to hide it, being it was daylight this time. Now comes the really fun part. For about 2 years after, I had almost ghost-like visits from these creatures. This is really the only way to explain it. They both would show up in my woods while collecting firewood or on a walk with my kids. The kids would look around more when I would notice the shadows move or get glimpses of the creatures, but not like they were anxious or heard a noise and are looking for the source. Now, I never got the same feelings I did the other times. I felt like it was a memory playing in my head, except they moved and did things that I didn't physically see them do. One day I had my dog with me, which I trained to protect my kids and wife at the time. He even tried to attack me when my ex took him into the woods on a leash, and I snuck out to see how he would react. I put on a new hoodie and pulled it over my face. He came after me, and even calling his name didn't calm him. It wasn't until he was close enough to smell me he calmed down, so I know he catches everything around him. He was not on a leash this day, and not even 10 feet in, his hair raises, and he starts growling, but seems confused as to why himself. Then we both see the creatures, about 20 feet ahead. I could see through them, and they moved as if made from smoke. My dog lunged at one and went right through it, with it dissipating like mist thinning in the morning sun. The other walked behind a tree and never came out the other side. It's been a few years now, and I haven't seen the creatures fully, but keep getting shadows at the edge of my view that look like them, and they keep getting close on both sides each time. I have the biggest problem with how can what was a fully physical interaction with what I figured was a cryptid or maybe otherworld being now be more like a paranormal or spirit interaction that seems like a soul following me. Could they have died and I'm the only one they didn't get, or are they projecting to me like a calling? Either way, holding it in for years and keeping the other 2 encounters from the people that I still talk to from the original group, I finally figured I'd put the encounters and instances out there and let others give their feelings and takes on it. None of it has interfered with my life, other than a few close heart attacks from anxiety or a couple of sleepless nights right after the encounters. Take as you will, but as for going from physical interaction to spectral over the years, I am lost. Now for the new fun times. Since this was originally revealed, almost 10 hours on the dot from when I shared this, there was a loud thud against the house. I ran out the patio door to the porch, which is raised off the ground close to 6 feet from the top of the landing to the ground. Along the sides, I couldn't see anything that would have made that loud of a sound. There is a decent-sized maple tree growing across from the patio doors, and I thought maybe a limb fell on the air conditioner unit and bounced under the porch. As I went back in, there was a thud again, but this time from the chicken coop. This time I ran through the house, grabbing my flashlight and handgun, and went out the back door. The yard around the house doesn't have much room from the house to the woods and to the area that we have our garden, chicken coop and shed. The chickens were not acting like anything happened and were sleeping still when I opened the door. This is odd because they usually are all up before I even get to their coop. Once again, nothing that could make the thud noise I heard, and I started thinking maybe my ears are playing tricks on me. I started heading to the house and heard leaves and branches from the ground started being broken and cracked like deer running through. I stopped for a minute to follow the sounds and see if I could catch a glimpse of what was running. Just as whatever was crashing through my woods got to our little field, which is about a square acre wide and 2 long, I clearly made out 4 deer. Any of us in the yard or moving about the house has never made the deer in the woods here run. It usually takes us walking into the woods a few yards before they even take much of notice. Living only a mile from the highway interchange and downtown to a larger city, they get used to people pretty quick. Even the airport, which handles smaller craft up to some larger corporate jets, doesn't seem to bother them. The deer even manage to get in there from time to time, which is entertaining to drive by and watch them try to shoo them through the gate closer to my house and to the farmland. But when these deer hit the field, they stopped like they hit a brick wall. They acted like a herd of impala in Africa, about to cross the Nile. They all want to go, but none wants to be the first. Like barrel racer horses, when they're getting ready to get the okay to go for it, pacing sideways, trotting in place and getting the right motivation to take off running. One in the back kept his head on a swivel between looking back and checking to see if it's time to run. After maybe a minute, I saw why they were acting this way. It wasn't the coyotes we have around, wasn't the traffic, or one almost getting hit. It was whatever was making the massive shadow starting to creep down the trail that leads to the field and them. It was certainly on all 4s, and was certainly not a coyote. My neighbor's Rottweiler, who is easily on the larger side, even for the breed, looks like a puppy to this shadow. At this point, I'm thinking, hearing about black bears moving into the general area around us, but also this thing would have been the largest black bear I have ever seen anywhere in my life. Over 4 feet to the shoulder, easy, and moved like liquid through the light brush. Now I'm thinking, well, crap. Maybe the 9mm won't be enough. I have 16 rounds in the mag and 1 in the chamber, but this thing still has me questioning if it's going to be enough, and how many I would get off anyway if it came at me. I would have to clear the trees before I would have a clear shot without the trees and brush in the way, but then it's only yards until it's on me. Fight or flight was right out the window as I was terrified, but also so intrigued as to what this was that I couldn't do either. This is the moment when my heart is racing and I am almost hyperventilating to the point of just passing out. I realize I know what this is. I have seen this creature before, but it has been years since I have seen it as a solid being. This is not one of the 2 from my past. The build seemed different from them, and it gave off a very imposing, very intimidating, and very uneasy vibe. How is it that before I had seen it, I felt like I do any other night outside that I went to investigate a noise or to run the coyotes off? Why is it this thing had to go by me and was closer to me than the deer, but I hear nothing and I didn't feel anything off until I picked it out of the shadows? I finally managed to take a few dozen steps backwards to the garage rear door and shut it. Best believe I locked that door as soon as it was shut and ran into the house. I made a quick line to my gun safe and grabbed the same 12-gauge shotgun I had back in Swan Creek. I loaded alternating shells of slugs, buckshot and birdshot just to cover all my bases. I started heading to the garage again. Then I thought, I'm a total dumbass. Go to the porch that looks over the backyard, woods and the field. I figured if it starts coming, I'm most likely done if the shotgun doesn't work anyway. Why make it jump for it? I opened the patio door and slide out with a bigger flashlight, which I knew reached across the highway past the field. As I turned it on, I saw the last of the deer moving up the side of the overpass hill, calmly and one at a time jump over the guardrails. I counted the same amount of deer I did in the first place, so why are they so calm now? Not like it got one and was leaving them alone unless I missed one. That creature very well could have grabbed a large, healthy and capable deer, and the deer wouldn't have had a chance, so not hearing a struggle didn't seem off. As I panned across the yard, the first time I missed it, looked right at it and didn't notice it in a small game run in the weeds, looking right at the house. As I almost made it across the yard, it then clicked that there was a solid mass where there shouldn't have been in the weeds, and looked back as far as I could, which made me hit the stock of the gun on the grill and lose grip on it. Still focused on getting the flashlight back to that spot, I started crouching down to grab the gun and just stopped dead. Once I got the flashlight back, it was there, halfway standing while holding the closest poplar tree on its right. The feelings I had were gone. I felt completely at ease and even stood back up without the gun. Maybe because I thought it would anger it, or the fact my handgun was in my waistband, so I still had some protection anyway. The look on its face made me move the light to the side so it wasn't directly on it, but I still could see it easily. It stood up a little more, to where it reminded me of an old man hunched over his cane because it never adjusted its height higher. It looked at me almost like it nodded and bowed before settling back down on all fours, and then continued to go the route the deer did. The only thing it did different was it went under the overpass bridge instead of over the road the bridge was for. I wanted a car to be heading west so bad I was almost shaking over getting someone else to see it, but it was almost 15 seconds and the next car did nothing more than slow down for a brief moment and then sped back up the same as I would for a deer crossing the road a little ways up. The latest was last night, around 11:30. My room is in the basement, and being a multi-level house, the basement is half above ground level. I have blacked out curtains on the window so it isn't extremely bright in the morning. As I was laying in bed, there was a rubbing on my window, similar to leaves. I just figured the leaves in the ground were blowing in the wind. But then there was a low grumble that was felt in the chest. I got up and looked out the window for nothing to be right there. I got my flashlight and grabbed my new 270 that I mounted a night vision camera. It looks down the existing scope and puts a feed onto a small screen mounted on the top of the scope. I figured why not use it since I have the new IR light attached and can see much clearer and further. I went to the porch again and set up my rifle, turned on the camera and IR light, and started panning. Behind my neighbors' houses, there is a spot that's protected from the house by a line of trees. In the clearing, they usually have large bonfires and store their tractors and wagons. Right beside the tractor was a huge dark mass. It seemed to be looking back in the direction of the neighbor's house that is passing my next door neighbor. They have a little yippy dog that seems to need the use of the bathroom every 15 minutes. Now, I had never seen this before, but those little yipper puppies have a built-in ability to scare coyotes off like no other. I have watched that little fluff with a mouth make a whole group tuck tail and run like it was a pride of lions coming at them. This thing wouldn't turn or move to get a better look, but the way it awkwardly was settled there let me know what it was. I had rounds in the rifle and could have chosen to try and settle this once and for all, but I can't do it. After about 15 minutes and 2 cigarettes, I slid around the tractor and I could see its feet move on the other side from underneath. It was carefully choosing its steps, and I didn't see anything in the direction it kept staring at, so I was lost as to why be that cautious. Then I got my answer. The neighbor let that little firecracker out to use the bathroom, and that thing was gone, like a missile gone. Dragsters on a green light gone. I heard only 1 second of it crushing through the woods to the highway, and then there was a little noise from the neighbors across the highway's woods, then silent. But that little dog knew it was there because it came out yipping and growling all the way to the tractor. He looked the direction the creature ran for a brief moment, but focused on the tractor, and he marked everything once he got there. I don't know how that little bag of fur could hold that much liquid, but he marked it all. It's late evening as I finish this, and each time I've gone to smoke, the air has a static charge and is quieter than usual. There is a chill I don't like that comes in on the wind, and the does came up our drive and across instead of the overpass like normal. They jumped the highway and moved through the woods without stopping once, which they have never done in all the years this house has been in the family. The 270 is loaded and the camera is charged. My phone is charged and on the charger anyway, so if I get a good view again, I won't miss recording it. Hard-learned lessons from last night and my eagerness to get out there. We will test again how good this thing is at following me if it is one of the same, because tomorrow I head north by a few hours to start the firearm deer season, and that 270 is going with. I never got a look at it the few times bow hunting up there this year, but the feeling was there along with some abnormal deer activity and actions.
My husband and I live in an apartment complex with our dog and cat. There's a forest trail behind our complex that leads to a park where we take our dog. It was a weekday, and I was taking our dog for a wee while I was on my lunch break. We took the parking lot to the trail, right behind the trash compactor for our apartment complex. The trail is usually empty, so walks don't get interrupted with other people, and the dog can do his business with minimal distraction. It's very scenic, and we have come across owls, bald eagles, squirrels, and the like. The wind goes through the pine trees, and we can occasionally hear cars go by on the main road ahead. It didn't take me long to realize something was different on this day, though. We had gone down the trail and stopped on the main road, turned around and started to head home. The wind seemed to suddenly stop just then, and I couldn't hear the birds that were so loud moments ago. That's when I saw it. A man laying on his back 10 feet away in the ivy. Honestly, it didn't register to me that this man was a person at first, so I stopped and turned around. His eyes were open, his teeth were broken, and he was missing the back of his head. Now my dog is spooked, and somehow wiggled out of his harness. The man was very clearly dead. The 911 operator asked if I had a defibrillator in my apartment that I could go grab and come back. I said no, but that he was very definitely deceased. She asked if I was sure, and that was the first time I was ever made to touch a corpse. I relayed back that there was no pulse, and that he was missing a lot of his head. As I backed away, I could see copious amounts of blood I hadn't noticed at first. It was soaked into the earth beneath him. While waiting for cops to arrive, I noticed he had a box next to him. This must have been the box he bought the firearm in. He had his glasses neatly folded and placed them on top of the gun box. He looked no more than 50, and I never went into those woods again. I live in a rural town surrounded by mountains and forests, so camping is a regular thing. Over the years, I've gotten used to the weird sounds, the occasional stare-downs with mountain lions, and all the usual creepy forest vibes. But one night still sticks with me, and probably always will. I was around 16 at the time. A group of us, all between 16 and 19, had headed out for a weekend trip. The main camp was set up near the lake, but me and a friend decided to break off and camp about a mile away near a better fishing spot. The others had the only tent, so we made a lean-to up against a big boulder in a clearing. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept getting this uneasy feeling like something was watching us. Given where we were, my first thought was a mountain lion, and honestly that didn't really bother me much. I've had more than a few run-ins with them, and if you know how they behave, they're not much of a threat. So I shrugged it off, threw a few more logs on the fire and tried to settle down again. That's when I looked up and saw him. Under the light of the full moon, maybe 80 yards away, there was a man standing at the edge of the clearing. I was frozen, I couldn't move, I couldn't look away. I don't even think I blinked. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, maybe a minute, maybe two, and then silently turned and walked off into the woods in the opposite direction. I doubt he meant any harm. Maybe he was just a lost hiker or someone curious about our fire, but at 16, sleeping in the middle of nowhere, it scared the hell out of me. I sat up the entire night with my friends, my firearm in my lap, eyes locked on the trees waiting to see if he came back. Looking back, I'd wish I'd called out. I was too inexperienced and too freaked out and honestly frozen in fear. These days I'd call out and ask if he needed anything, or at least get a better sense of what was going on. Still, out of all the strange things I've seen while camping, that quiet man under the moonlight is one of the creepiest things that keeps coming back to me. This happened a few years ago, on a multi-day backpacking trip with a group of friends. We had a decent-sized group, maybe 8 of us, spread across a few tents in a forested campsite not too far from a lake. We were a few days in, and by then we were all in the rhythm of waking up with the sun, making coffee, and doing breakfast over the fire. This morning, though, I woke up just before dawn, not because of an alarm or anything, but because I heard something. It was quiet at first, something moving around the camp. It didn't sound like a person. I stayed still and listened. Then I heard what I'm almost positive was a tent being torn. That really distinct ripping sound of nylon under strain, like something was being pulled hard and sliced at the same time. This is definitely not something you're supposed to hear while in the middle of nowhere. I was about to unzip my tent and check it out when I heard someone yell. Not just a startled noise, but screaming. One of our group had woken up to a bear actively going through their tent. I grabbed the closest thing I had for protection, which happened to be a solid oak walking stick I used on the trail. I got outside and saw the bear, a medium-sized black bear dragging a backpack out of the tents. The tent was totally wrecked on one side, collapsed with gear already scattered. By this point, everyone was waking up, unzipping tents, stepping out, a few people still trying to figure out what was going on. A couple of them just froze and stared at the bear, unsure what to do. Instinctively, I just yelled at the top of my lungs, not panicked, but loud. The bear looked up at me and paused, like it was trying to decide what I was. I raised the stick and started walking quickly towards it, yelling, just moving straight at it with purpose. It stood halfway up on its back legs for a moment, then dropped down and bolted into the tree line. I think the combination of surprise noise and seeing a person coming at it was enough to convince it that breakfast wasn't worth it. Afterward, everyone was kind of standing there groggy and tense and wide-eyed. The friends whose tent got hit were shaken but fine. The backpack had some food in it that shouldn't have been there, lesson learned, and the bear definitely knew it. Later that morning, one of the guys laughed and said, "Well, you're alpha bear now," and that stuck for the rest of the trip. These days, my friends call me Bear. Half joke, half badge of honor. Stay careful out there though, guys. The first time I ever went camping with my kids was at Girl Scout camp in southern Michigan 5 years ago. We, as in the Cub Scout troop, were all camped in this flat clearing on top of a hill overlooking the lake. To get to the bathrooms, you had to walk down this big hill through the forest, and up another. I woke up around 3 to 4 a.m. and had to pee really badly. I wasn't comfortable enough with the group yet, just to go close-ish to the tent, so I decided to walk to the bathrooms. I was already nervous about the whole thing, but I was going to be a grown-up and just do it. About halfway there, where the hill started going back up, I began feeling like something was not right, and then suddenly heard a noise off to the right of me that I still can't give an explanation for. It was a loud, predatorial screech, like something was hunting and about to make a kill. I took about a second to pause and was like, "Not today," and sped walk back to my tent. I woke my boy's dad and asked if he'd heard it, but he didn't, and acted more annoyed with me for waking him up. I felt insane, and like I'd just been making it up until the next morning, when another mum asked, "Did anyone else hear that loud noise in the woods at around 3 a.m? I've lived in Michigan most of my life. This wasn't any of the normal scary wood screaming noises like a bobcat, owl, fox, or possum, etc. That we have here. The other mum was also someone that was big into the outdoors and camping, and she confirmed that it didn't sound like anything she'd ever heard before. I looked up what wolverines sound like. That would definitely have freaked me out to hear in the forest, but it was something totally different. The other woman that had heard it and I were both completely flabbergasted, and I've tried to find other animals that sound like it, but none have even come close. There's probably a logical explanation for it, but whatever it was didn't feel right, and I've seen enough horror movies to know that. This story has been passed around the family enough times, it's basically become family legend. My grandma, who was born in the 1920s, grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. You know, small town America where wildlife mostly meant squirrels, barn cats, and the occasional deer. She wasn't exactly the wilderness type. She wore heels to church, curled her hair with soup cans, and thought camping was when you opened a window. Anyway, after she got married to my grandfather, they decided to go on a camping trip. And not just to anywhere, no. They went up north somewhere in Montana. Real wild country. I'm not sure if it was their honeymoon or something. So anyway, they go out hiking. And when they make their way back, there's a bear in the middle of their camp, nose deep in their cooler. And specifically, the bear was investigating the steaks my grandma had bought for dinner. Now, most people in this situation would probably freeze or back away. Not grandma though. This woman, who again grew up thinking raccoons were exotic, marches straight up to the bear with the confidence of someone who's about to ask for the manager, and in her hand an axe, but not the sharp side pointed forwards, mind you, the flat side, and she just whaps it straight on the nose and the bear runs off. Now, listen, was it a big bear or a baby bear? A confused oversized dog wearing a trash bag? I have no idea. No one really remembers. The story's been told 100 times at family dinners and backyard barbecues every time. The bear gets bigger and meaner the more people say the story. But what makes the story even cooler is that this is the same woman who during World War II was a real-life Rosie the Riveter. She built parts for fighter planes while wearing red lipstick and scowling at anyone who doubted her strength, and she was tiny, like 5'2". So yeah, my grandma was badass. She probably didn't realize how much danger she was in when she went and smacked a bear in the nose, but I still think it's pretty cool. Who knows, I imagine there's a bear 80 years later still telling his grandcubs about the tiny human who walked up to him and smacked him mid-snack. And I just know she didn't even drop the stakes. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you have enjoyed tonight's collection of scary camping stories. I would like to thank my good friend Deadly Cure for joining me in tonight's installment. If you'd like to hear more from him, please check out the link in the description and on screen shortly to see more of his work. I'm sorry for missing the upload on Tuesday. I'll explain more another day. But good stuff's coming soon. Just you wait. That's it from me though. Final thank you to my members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.